The grandfather clock struck 11:47 p.m. Silence hung in the Manhattan penthouse like expensive cologne. 12-year-old Keisha Washington sat perfectly still. Before her, towers of poker chips caught the chandelier light, red, blue, and black discs worth $15,000. Four wealthy white men stared across the mahogany table, their earlier laughter now a bitter memory. "This is impossible." Richard Whitmore's voice cracked like thin ice. His Armani suit couldn't hide the sweat beading on his forehead. "No child could what, sir?" Keisha's fingers found the silver quarter in her pocket. The 1964 coin felt warm against your palm, grandmother's lucky piece that had taught her probability was never about luck at all. It was about preparation meeting opportunity. The air reeked of Cuban cigars and wounded pride. 3 hours earlier, these titans of industry had invited Jerome Washington's daughter to play for fun, like bringing a dog to perform tricks for their amusement. Now their condescending smiles had died, replaced only by the relentless tick of Whitmore's Rolex marking time toward midnight. "You want to know how I did it?" Keisha's voice carried the weight of every dismissive glance, every whispered comment about her father knowing his place. She placed Grandmother Dolores's weathered probability theory book on the green felt. It started with this. The story rewinds to 3 weeks earlier, when Jerome Washington first heard his daughter ask the question that would change everything. "Daddy, why do they look at us like that?" 3 weeks earlier, Harlem hummed with its eternal rhythm. The Washington apartment sat above Mrs. Rodriguez's bodega on 125th Street. The scent of café con leche drifted through thin walls, mixing with car exhaust and the distant sound of jazz from Marcus Garvey Park. This was home, cramped but warm, struggling but proud. Jerome Washington stood at the kitchen sink counting tips in singles and fives. MIT dropout, former mathematics graduate student who'd abandoned his doctorate when Keisha was born. Now he wore a black uniform and drove wealthy men to places he'd never afford to enter. At the same scarred table where he calculated rent payments, 12-year-old Keisha solved calculus problems. 2 grades ahead, socially isolated, she found comfort in numbers that never lied or judged. The kitchen radio played Stevie Wonder's Sir Duke, and she hummed along while penciling derivatives in perfect handwriting. "Daddy, why do they look at us like that?" Jerome's hands stilled on the bills. He'd hoped she hadn't noticed. The way clients' voices changed when they saw his uniform. How their eyes shifted when he spoke with his natural vocabulary instead of the careful, humble tone expected from the help. "Look at us how, baby?" Like we don't belong, like we're less. On the refrigerator, a photo from last 4th of July showed Grandmother Dolores dealing cards at a family barbecue. Her weathered hands had been steady even during chemotherapy, teaching neighborhood kids probability while fireworks exploded overhead. She died 2 months later, leaving behind only her probability theory book and a story Keisha was still too young to understand. Jerome pulled the book from Keisha's backpack, pages yellowed, binding cracked, and margins filled with Dolores's careful handwriting. Taped inside the back cover was a 1964 silver quarter. "Your grandmother used to say this quarter was lucky," Jerome said softly. "Not because of magic, but because it reminded her when everything changed. 1964, the year the Civil Rights Act passed." Keisha traced the coin's worn surface. "She told me something different before she died." "What's that?" She said luck is just preparation meeting opportunity, and that sometimes you have to play their game to change the rules. Jerome's phone buzzed. Elite Executive Transport. New assignment. Regular Friday driver for Richard Whitmore. Tech billionaire. High-profile client. Good tips. Maybe their break. "This could be it, baby," he said, pocketing the phone. "Steady money means better opportunities for you." Keisha nodded, but her fingers stayed on the quarter. Grandmother had whispered other things too, about dignity, about playing multiple games simultaneously, about never letting them see you sweat, but always letting them underestimate you. Neither father nor daughter knew how prophetic those words would prove. 2 weeks into the Whitmore assignment, everything shattered. Friday night, Upper East Side pickup. Jerome waited outside the Century Club as rain drummed against the Lincoln's windshield. Through the security camera app on his phone, Keisha monitored from home, a safety precaution that would prove providential. Whitmore emerged with his usual entourage: Senator Bradford, oil executive Marcus Reed, and Dr. Harrison from Mount Sinai. All drunk, all loud, all careless with their words and wine. "Jerome, right?" Senator Bradford slurred as he climbed in. "Rich tells me you're the smart one. College boy playing chauffeur." Jerome's jaw tightened. "Yes, sir. MIT." "MIT." Bradford's laughter was ugly. "What happened? Couldn't hack the real world?" The other men chuckled. Jerome kept his eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel. He'd learned to swallow such humiliation. Bills didn't pay themselves. Then Bradford's wine glass tilted. Burgundy splashed across Jerome's white shirt, staining the crisp uniform he'd pressed that morning. "Oops." Bradford's tone held no apology. "Here's $5 for cleanup. That should cover it, right?" The car erupted in laughter. Jerome accepted the crumpled bill with practiced grace. "Thank you, sir." But through the phone speaker, Keisha heard everything. Watched her father's dignity dissolve in real time. Saw him smile while his soul broke a little more. That night, Jerome showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing at wine stains that had already set, washing away shame that clung deeper than fabric. He found Keisha at 2 a.m., studying grandmother's book by lamplight. "Why don't you stand up to them, Daddy?" Jerome sat heavily beside her. The weight of 15 years raising a daughter alone, of dreams deferred, of pride swallowed daily, it all pressed down like gravity. Because standing up and falling down aren't the same thing, baby. Sometimes you bend so you don't break. Keisha's fingers traced the silver quarter's edge. Grandmother's quarter didn't bend. No, it didn't. She opened the book to a page marked with penciled marginalia. "Dignity means playing the long game, baby girl. Let them underestimate you. It's the only advantage we get." The next morning, Whitmore mentioned to his poker friends that Jerome's daughter was supposedly some kind of math genius, his tone suggesting amusement rather than respect, like discussing a circus act. Keisha overheard through the intercom, made a decision. She asked Jerome to teach her poker, claiming it was for a probability project. She didn't mention she'd already calculated every possible hand combination, or that she was done watching from the sidelines. The termination notice came on a Tuesday. Margaret Chen, Whitmore's Korean-American COO, delivered it personally. Her Harvard MBA and corner office couldn't hide the discomfort in her eyes as she met Jerome at the company garage. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Whitmore wants a less complicated driver, someone who doesn't overshadow the clients with unnecessary conversation." Jerome's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Translation: someone who knew their place. When? End of the week. But Jerome. Margaret glanced around, then leaned closer. "This isn't about your performance. It's about his ego. You corrected the GPS to avoid that accident last Friday, saved him 20 minutes and possibly his life, but you made him look foolish in front of his friends." That evening, Keisha found Jerome staring at job listings on his laptop. The math was brutal. No other position paid enough to keep her in the gifted program. "We'll figure something out, baby." But Keisha was already figuring. She'd spent days studying grandmother's book with new intensity, discovering marginalia she'd never noticed, mathematical formulas for card counting, psychological observations about reading tells, and most surprising, evidence that Dolores Washington had been more than just a grandmother who played casual poker. Hidden between pages 247 and 248, Keisha found a yellowed newspaper clipping. "Local woman wins underground poker championship 1967. The grainy photo showed a younger Dolores holding a stack of bills surrounded by angry white men. The article's final line made Keisha's breath catch. Washington used her winnings to fund 3 families' legal fees during housing discrimination cases. She'd used their own game against them. Margaret Chen's voice interrupted her thoughts. She'd somehow gotten Keisha's phone number. "Your father mentioned you're mathematically gifted," Margaret said carefully. "I run a summer program for exceptional young women in STEM. But that's not why I'm calling." She paused, choosing words carefully. "Whitmore's poker group loses thousands every Friday. They're wealthy but terrible players who rely on intimidation over skill. And they've been discussing your father's genius daughter like she's some kind of curiosity." Keisha's pulse quickened. What kind of discussion? The kind where rich men make stupid bets about things they don't understand. That night, Keisha examined the silver quarter under her desk lamp. The inscription had worn smooth, but she could still make out fragments. "In God we trust." But grandmother had taught her to trust in preparation. She opened the book to a page she'd memorized. "Count 4 beats, baby, like a jazz rhythm. Never let them see you sweat, but always let them underestimate you." At 3 a.m., Jerome found her calculating probability matrices. "You know what grandmother's quarter really taught me, Daddy?" "What's that?" "That 1964 was the year they legally had to treat us equal. But grandmother already knew we were superior. She just had to prove it at a card table." Jerome studied his daughter's face, saw a determination that reminded him of Dolores, and perhaps something more dangerous: hope. When Whitmore casually mentioned wanting to meet this genius daughter, Keisha volunteered before Jerome could object. She was done watching from the sidelines. The invitation came with conditions that revealed everything. "Here's what we'll do," Whitmore announced during Friday's pickup, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone unaccustomed to being told no. "Bring your little mathematician tonight. Let her play a hand or two. If she's really as smart as you claim, it should be entertaining." Jerome's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Sir, she's just a child." "Exactly. What's the harm?" Senator Bradford's laugh was sharp with wine and malice. "Besides, I bet she can't even understand basic poker strategy. Kids today are all about their phones and video games." Dr. Harrison leaned forward, his surgeon's precision applied to cruelty. "I'll put money on it. 500 says your daughter doesn't last 30 minutes before she's crying for daddy." "Make it interesting," Reed added, oil money making him bold. "If the kid actually wins a hand, Jerome keeps his job. 6-month contract guarantee." Whitmore's eyes gleamed. This wasn't about Keisha's intelligence. This was about proving Jerome belonged in his place. Subservient, grateful, knowing his daughter was just another form of entertainment for their amusement. "Deal," Whitmore said, "but when she loses Jerome, we're done. No severance, no references." Through the intercom, Keisha heard every word. Her fingers found grandmother's quarter, feeling its worn edges. This wasn't poker. This was psychological warfare disguised as a game. That evening, Margaret Chen appeared at their apartment door with intelligence and strategy. "Whitmore touches his wedding ring when he bluffs," she said quietly, spreading poker books across their kitchen table. "Bradford gets aggressive when he drinks, but his tells become obvious. Reed overcompensates when uncertain. He'll bet big on weak hands. Harrison thinks he's the smartest person in any room, which makes him predictable." Keisha absorbed every detail while studying grandmother's hidden formulas. Mathematical equations for reading microexpressions, psychological frameworks for understanding betting patterns, most importantly, breathing techniques for maintaining composure under pressure. "Count 4 beats, baby, like a jazz rhythm," she whispered, practicing the meditation grandmother had taught her. Jerome watched his daughter transform before his eyes. The shy, socially awkward girl was disappearing, replaced by someone who understood the metagame they were really playing.
What if you lose, baby? What if they humiliate you like they humiliate me? Keisha opened grandmother's book to the newspaper clipping. A young Dolores surrounded by angry white men who'd underestimated her, who'd thought she was just another black woman they could dismiss. Grandmother never played to lose, Daddy. She played to change the game. She closed her eyes, feeling the quarter's weight in her palm. 1964, the year everything changed legally. But grandmother had been changing things long before the law caught up. Margaret handed Keisha her business card. Whatever happens tonight, you call me. This isn't just about poker anymore. As they prepared to leave, Keisha made one final calculation. The odds of winning weren't in her favor. 4 experienced players against a 12-year-old child. But grandmother had taught her about different kinds of mathematics. The kind that accounts for hubris, racism, and the arrogance of men who'd never faced real consequences. She touched the quarter one more time. Sometimes you need luck, she whispered, remembering grandmother's words. But mostly, you need to make your own. The ride to Manhattan felt like traveling between worlds. Behind them, Harlem and everything familiar. Ahead, a penthouse where 4 wealthy men waited to prove that some people would always know their place. They had no idea Keisha Washington was about to teach them about their own.
The penthouse elevator rose like a gilded cage carrying them toward judgment. Keisha's reflection stared back from polished brass. A 12-year-old girl in her best dress, grandmother's book clutched against her chest, silver quarter warm in her palm. Behind her, Jerome's face showed the weight of everything they were risking. The doors opened to reveal wealth beyond imagination. Persian rugs worth more than their annual rent. Crystal chandeliers casting prismed light across mahogany furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Manhattan like a conquered kingdom. "Well, well," Whitmore's voice dripped condescension. "The famous math prodigy." 4 men turned from their conversation, titans of industry treating this evening like a safari expedition to observe exotic creatures. Senator Bradford swirled his bourbon, eyes already glazed with alcohol and anticipation. "Aren't you precious, playing dress-up at the big boy table?" Dr. Harrison's surgical precision extended to his cruelty. "I've delivered babies smarter than most adults. Let's see what this one can do." Marcus Reed, oil executive with hands that had never known honest work, gestured dismissively. "Jerome, get the girl a juice box. This won't take long." Their laughter filled the space like poison gas. Keisha said nothing, counted 4 beats like grandmother taught her, jazz rhythm, steady breathing. She'd learned to read people long before she'd learned to read cards. The poker table sat beneath a spotlight that felt designed for interrogation. Green felt stretched between them like a battlefield. Chips stacked in military precision. Red hundreds, blue thousands, black chips worth more than Jerome's monthly salary. "House rules," Whitmore announced, dealing cards with theatrical flourish. "Texas Hold'em, 500 buy-in, winner takes all. The child gets 1 hour to prove she belongs here. 1 hour to save her father's job. 1 hour to prove they were more than entertainment for wealthy men's amusement." Keisha took her seat. The chair swallowed her small frame, but her posture remained perfect. She opened grandmother's book, letting them see the worn pages and penciled marginalia. "A children's book?" Bradford sneered. "How adorable." "Actually, it's advanced probability theory," Keisha replied calmly. "My grandmother was quite accomplished at mathematics." The men exchanged glances. The first hand was dealt. Keisha studied her cards. Pair of sevens, medium strength. But she wasn't playing the cards, she was playing the players. Whitmore touched his wedding ring twice before betting. Bradford's breathing changed when excited. Reed's left eye twitched when uncertain. Dr. Harrison leaned forward when confident, back when bluffing. "I'll call," she said quietly, matching their bets. The flop came, 7 of hearts, king of spades, 2 of diamonds. 3 of a kind, sevens. Strong hand, but Keisha's expression never changed. Bradford bet aggressively, his tell screaming desperation. Whitmore touched his ring and folded. Reed's eye twitched before he called. Harrison leaned back, bluffing. "Raise," Keisha said softly, pushing chips forward. "The little girl's got spirit," Reed laughed, but sweat beaded his forehead. The turn card, ace of clubs. The river, 10 of hearts. Bradford went all in, Bergen making him reckless. Reed folded, eye twitching frantically. Harrison stayed in, pride overriding logic. Keisha studied her opponents like mathematical equations. Bradford, drunk, desperate, bluffing. Harrison, arrogant, overconfident, weak hand. "Call," she said. Bradford flipped his cards. Bluff, nothing. Harrison showed 2 pair, 10s and 2s. Keisha quietly revealed her 3 sevens. Silence crashed over the table like a physical force. "Beginner's luck," Whitmore muttered, but his voice carried less certainty. The second hour began, then the third. Keisha won methodically, mathematically. Not every hand, that would have been suspicious, but she won the hands that mattered, reading her opponents like grandmother's marginalia had taught her. Bradford grew more desperate with each loss, alcohol clouding judgment further. Reed's tells became increasingly obvious. Harrison's arrogance cracked as his chip stack dwindled. Even Whitmore's wedding ring tell became a liability he couldn't control. "This is impossible," Harrison finally exploded. "No child could read us this accurately." "I'm not reading you, sir," Keisha replied, touching the quarter in her pocket. "I'm reading the mathematics of your behavior. Probability doesn't care about age or race or gender. It only cares about patterns." By 11:30 p.m., Keisha had won $15,000. The men sat in stunned silence, their earlier laughter now a bitter memory. 4 wealthy, powerful individuals had been systematically dismantled by a 12-year-old girl, using nothing but intelligence, observation, and her grandmother's wisdom. "This is impossible," Whitmore whispered, his voice cracking like his confidence. Keisha placed grandmother's book on the table, her fingers tracing its worn cover. The same book that had guided Dolores through underground poker games in 1967. The same wisdom that had funded legal battles against housing discrimination. "No, sir," she said quietly, "this is mathematics. This is preparation meeting opportunity. This is what happens when you underestimate people because you've never bothered to see them as equals." She stood, pocketing the chips with dignity that would have made Dolores proud. $15,000. Enough to secure Jerome's position and prove that some games were worth playing, not for money, but for respect. "Thank you for the lesson, gentlemen," Keisha said, her voice carrying the weight of every generation that had fought for this moment. The room fell silent, except for the grandfather clock marking midnight. Jerome beamed with pride as his daughter walked toward the elevator, head held high, just like grandmother Dolores had taught her. The aftermath unfolded like ripples from a dropped stone. Dr. Harrison was the first to break. His surgeon's hands trembled as he reached for his wallet, extracting 5 crisp hundreds. "I've never seen strategic thinking like that from someone your age," he admitted quietly, "or from most adults, if I'm being honest." The admission hung in the air like an indictment. Senator Bradford, sobered by both his losses and the magnitude of what had occurred, cleared his throat. "Young lady, I owe you an apology. Several, actually." His bourbon-glazed eyes had cleared to something approaching shame. "Your father has shown more grace under pressure than most senators I know." Marcus Reed studied Keisha with newfound respect. The mathematics. How long have you been studying probability theory? Since I was 8, Keisha replied simply. My grandmother started teaching me when she was undergoing treatment. She said numbers were honest company when people weren't. Even Whitmore's carefully constructed superiority had cracked. He sat staring at the empty chip holders where his money had been, processing the impossible reality that his fundamental assumptions about the world had just been shattered by a 12-year-old. Jerome, he said finally, his voice carrying none of its earlier condescension, we need to discuss your employment situation. Sir? I'm promoting you to Executive Transportation Coordinator. 40% salary increase, 6-month contract guarantee, as agreed. Whitmore's eyes found Keisha. Your daughter just taught me more about strategic thinking than my Harvard Business School professors did. Margaret Chen stepped forward from where she'd been quietly observing near the bar. Keisha, I meant what I said about the STEM program. You'd be our youngest participant, but clearly not our least qualified. She handed Jerome a business card. I also run a scholarship fund for exceptional students, full tuition plus stipend for advanced mathematics courses. The transformation in the room was palpable. What had begun as sport, wealthy men amusing themselves at the expense of their perceived inferiors, had evolved into something approaching reverence. Keisha placed grandmother's worn book carefully in her backpack, her fingers lingering on the silver quarter before tucking it safely into her pocket. The weight of history, of Dolores's legacy, of this moment, it all crystallized into quiet pride. Mr. Whitmore, she said, shouldering her backpack with the same dignity she'd maintained throughout the evening. My grandmother always said that respect isn't given, it's earned. Tonight, I earned mine. I hope you've learned to earn yours. The elevator doors closed on 4 men who would never look at Jerome Washington or any person they'd previously dismissed quite the same way again. As they descended toward street level, Jerome finally exhaled the breath he'd been holding for 3 hours. Baby, I'm so proud of you I can barely speak. Keisha smiled, feeling grandmother's quarter warm against her palm. She was with me the whole time, Daddy. Every calculation, every read, every moment I wanted to be scared, she was right there. The elevator reached the lobby. Through the glass doors, Harlem waited, still home, still theirs, but somehow different now. They walked into the night air carrying something they'd never possessed before, the unshakable knowledge that they belonged anywhere they chose to be. What now? Jerome asked as they climbed into their car. Keisha pulled out her phone and opened the calculator app. Now we figure out how to invest $15,000 in our future. I'm thinking advanced mathematics courses, maybe some programming classes. She paused, grinning. And definitely a frame for grandmother's newspaper clipping. Behind them, the penthouse lights dimmed as 4 wealthy men contemplating lessons they'd never expected to learn from a girl they'd underestimated. Ahead, Harlem Street stretched toward home, where dreams were being recalculated and possibilities expanded beyond anything either Washington had dared imagine just hours before.
6 months later, the Harlem Community Mathematics Center buzzed with afternoon energy. Local news cameras surrounded 12-year-old Keisha Washington as she tutored a group of 8-year-olds using probability theory. On her desk sat a framed photograph, Grandmother Dolores dealing cards at Marcus Garvey Park in 1964, the same year everything changed. Mathematics, Keisha told her students, gesturing to equations covering the whiteboard, is the one language that speaks truth to power. Every single one of you is already fluent, you just need to learn to use your voice. The reporter leaned forward. Keisha, tell us about that famous poker night. She smiled, touching the silver quarter now hanging from a chain around her neck. It wasn't about the money. It was about proving that intelligence doesn't have a color, age, or zip code. The camera panned to show children of all backgrounds solving complex problems together, a testament to the ripple effects of one extraordinary evening. Jerome Washington had thrived in his new position as Executive Transportation Coordinator. The 40% salary increase meant Keisha could attend advanced mathematics courses while staying in her Harlem public school, committed to changing the system from inside. Margaret Chen's scholarship program had expanded, partly funded by an anonymous donation from 4 wealthy men who'd learned humility at a poker table. 3 other children from the community now received full educational support. The Dolores Washington Memorial Mathematics Program occupied the community center's largest room. Grandmother's original probability theory book sat in a place of honor at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. But Keisha had added her own note beside the preserved silver quarter. For every girl who needs to remember that lucky means prepared, not blessed. "What's next for you?" the reporter asked. Keisha glanced toward the window where Manhattan's skyline stretched toward the horizon. No longer a barrier, but simply another neighborhood where she happened to belong. "MIT's early admission program has expressed interest," she said matter-of-factly. "But first, I want to make sure every kid in this community knows they're capable of calculating their way to anywhere they want to go." The story had gone viral under #PokerProdigyKeisha, trending for 3 days and inspiring discussions about hidden talent in underrepresented communities. But for Keisha, the real victory was smaller and more personal. That evening, Jerome found her reviewing college applications at their kitchen table, the same table where she'd once solved calculus problems while he counted tips in singles and fives. "Proud of you, baby," he said, settling beside her. "Daddy," Keisha looked up from her paperwork, "do you think Grandmother knew? When she gave me that quarter and taught me about poker, did she know I'd need those lessons?" Jerome smiled, remembering Dolores's final words about preparation meeting opportunity. "I think she knew you'd need to be ready for anything, and baby, you were more than ready." Outside, Harlem continued its eternal rhythm of struggle and triumph, loss and hope. But inside their apartment above Mrs. Rodriguez's bodega, a father and daughter planned a future where the only limits were the ones they chose to accept. The silver quarter caught the lamplight, bearing witness to dreams that had transformed from impossible to inevitable, one calculated move at a time. Word count 470, and the arrogance of men who'd never faced real consequences. She touched the quarter one more time. "Sometimes you need luck," she whispered, remembering Grandmother's words. "But mostly you need to make your own." The ride to Manhattan felt like traveling between worlds. Behind them, Harlem and everything familiar. Ahead, a penthouse where 4 wealthy men waited to prove that some people would always know their place. They had no idea Keisha Washington was about to teach them about their own.